Everyone talks about becoming a millionaire. Financial gurus preach about six-figure incomes. Social media influencers flash their luxury lifestyles funded by seven-figure portfolios. But here's what nobody tells you. The real game changer in your financial life isn't hitting $1 million. It's not even reaching six figures. The true turning point, the moment when everything fundamentally shifts, happens at a number so modest that most people completely overlook it. $20,000. That's it. That's the invisible threshold that separates people who will build wealth from those who won't. And the psychology and mathematics behind why this specific number matters so much will completely change how you think about money. Most people spend their entire lives pushing against an invisible wall, wondering why wealth building feels so impossibly hard. They save a few hundred here, 1,000 there, but it never seems to add up to anything meaningful. The effort feels endless. The progress feels microscopic. And eventually, many just give up, convinced that wealth is reserved for people luckier or smarter than them. But the truth is far more interesting. Wealth accumulation isn't a smooth, linear climb. It's a series of thresholds, invisible lines you cross that fundamentally alter the rules of the game. And $20,000 is the first major threshold, the one that changes absolutely everything about your relationship with money. Think of it like pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill. In the beginning, every inch of progress requires enormous effort. Your legs burn, your arms shake. You're pouring everything you have into moving this rock, and it barely budges. That's what saving your first $20,000 feels like for most people. Every dollar requires sacrifice. Every week without dipping into savings feels like a victory. The finish line seems impossibly far away, but here's what changes everything. Once you get that boulder to a certain point on the hill, something magical happens. Momentum kicks in. Suddenly, the same effort that was producing inches of progress starts producing feet. The boulder begins rolling with its own energy. And eventually, you're not even pushing anymore. You're just guiding it. That shift, that moment when physics starts working with you instead of against you, happens at $20,000. And most people have no idea this threshold even exists. The change that happens at $20,000 isn't just mathematical, it's deeply psychological. When your bank account hovers near zero, or even when you've got a few thousand saved, your brain operates in what neuroscientists call survival mode. This isn't metaphorical, it's literal brain chemistry. In survival mode, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term planning and strategic thinking, gets suppressed. Your amygdala, the fear center, takes over. Every financial decision becomes about immediate threat avoidance. You take jobs you hate because you need the paycheck now. You stay in situations that drain you because leaving feels too risky. You say yes to things you don't want to do because turning down money, any money, feels dangerous. Your brain isn't thinking about growth or opportunity. It's thinking about survival. How do I make rent? How do I keep the lights on? How do I eat this week? But something profound happens when you cross $20,000. Research shows that having just $2,000 in emergency savings increases financial well-being by 21%. That's the cost of a decent vacation or a new laptop, and it produces a massive psychological shift. But when you hit 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for most people lands around $20,000, you get an additional 13% boost in well-being. Why? Because your brain finally has permission to stop operating in pure survival mode. For the first time, maybe ever, you have breathing room. And in that breathing room, a new question emerges. Instead of, how do I survive? Your brain starts asking, how do I grow this? That shift from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking is worth more than any investment return you'll ever see. Now let's talk about the mathematics, because this is where things get really interesting. Imagine you're saving $1,000 a month and investing it in something earning 8% annually, which is extremely achievable with basic index funds. Your first $20,000 takes about 19 months to accumulate. That's over a year and a half of discipline, sacrifice, and consistency. But here's where the momentum effect kicks in. Your second $20,000? It takes 17 months. Not 19, 17. Why? Because that first $20,000 is now working for you, generating returns while you continue adding your monthly contributions. The third $20,000 comes even faster. The fourth, faster still. By the time you hit a portfolio value of $400,000, you're earning the next $20,000 in just 5 months from investment returns alone. You're not even saving anymore at that point. The money is generating itself. This is compound interest in action, and it's not magic, it's pure mathematics. But it only starts working powerfully after you cross that initial threshold. A lot of people assume wealthy individuals have access to some secret club of exclusive investment opportunities. They imagine hedge funds with minimum investments of $1 million, private equity deals, insider information. And sure, those things exist. But the $20,000 effect isn't about access to special deals. It's about simple mathematics that anyone can harness. The same index fund you can buy with $1,000 is the same one a millionaire buys. The same real estate investment trusts, the same bonds. The risk level is identical. The difference is scale. 10% return on $1,000 gives you $100. 10% on $10,000 gives you $1,000. 10% on $20,000 gives you $2,000. Same percentage, same risk, completely different impact on your life. When you're working with larger numbers, modest percentage gains translate into real, meaningful money that can actually change your circumstances. That's the power of scale, and $20,000 is where scale starts mattering. But there's another dimension to this that's equally important. Saving $20,000 requires something most people have never developed: genuine financial discipline. To hit that number, you have to track every dollar. You have to say no to immediate desires in favor of future goals. You have to resist impulse purchases. You have to maintain consistency through months, maybe years, of small daily choices that nobody else sees or appreciates. And here's what's powerful about that process. It rewires your brain. Neuroscience shows that building any habit, especially one requiring delayed gratification, strengthens the neural pathways associated with self-control. By the time you've saved $20,000, you've essentially proven to yourself that you can control your impulses, that you can commit to long-term goals, that you're the kind of person who follows through. That identity shift is massive. You stop being someone who wants to save money and become someone who does save money. And that identity carries forward into every financial decision you make for the rest of your life. The discipline required to reach $20,000 isn't just about money. It's about building a fundamental life skill. Let's talk about what actually changes in your day-to-day life once you cross this threshold. Before $20,000, unexpected expenses are disasters. Your car breaks down, and you're spiraling, figuring out which bill you can skip, whether you can borrow from family, how you'll survive the next 2 weeks. After $20,000, that same car repair is annoying, sure, but it's manageable. It's an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Your laptop dies? That's actually an opportunity to upgrade instead of a crisis. Your rent increases? You can evaluate whether it's worth staying or if you should move. An actual strategic decision instead of panicked acceptance. This shift from disaster to inconvenience fundamentally changes your stress levels and mental health. But it goes beyond just handling emergencies. Opportunities that were previously invisible suddenly become accessible. Your friend starts a business and needs investors. Before, you couldn't even consider it. After $20,000, you can evaluate it as a real option. Someone mentions a real estate deal with strong potential. You can actually look into it instead of immediately dismissing it as not for people like me. You see a conference that could advance your career but costs $1,500 to attend. You can make a strategic choice about whether the investment is worth it. Having money creates options, and options create more opportunities. It's a compounding effect that goes far beyond just the dollars themselves. Here's something most people don't realize until they experience it. The way you think about budgeting completely transforms. Before you have $20,000 saved, you obsess over micro decisions. Should you buy the name brand cereal or the store brand? Is it worth driving 5 minutes further for gas that's 3 cents cheaper per gallon? Should you really spend $4 on that coffee? Your mental energy is consumed by these tiny choices, none of which actually move the needle on your net worth. But after crossing $20,000, something shifts. You stop sweating the small stuff because you realize it doesn't matter. What matters are the big 3 decisions: housing, transportation, and your savings rate. These are the choices that actually determine whether you build wealth or stay broke forever. Getting your housing cost reasonable, avoiding the trap of expensive cars, and maintaining a solid savings rate, these moves have 100 times more impact than whether you buy organic vegetables or regular ones. 20,000 in savings gives you the mental clarity to focus on what actually matters, liberating enormous amounts of mental energy for strategic thinking instead of penny-pinching stress. The career impact of having 20,000 saved is something most people never consider, but it's absolutely massive. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're in the weakest possible negotiating position with your employer. You can't push back on unreasonable demands. You can't negotiate for a raise with any real leverage. You definitely can't quit, even if the job is destroying your mental health or stunting your career growth. You're trapped, and everyone knows it, especially your boss. But $20,000? That's walking away money. It's not enough to retire on, obviously, but it's enough that you could quit tomorrow and have several months to find something better. And here's the interesting part. You probably won't actually quit, but the confidence that comes from knowing you could change is everything. You negotiate harder. You set better boundaries. You take on projects that showcase your skills instead of just doing whatever keeps you safest. And ironically, this confidence, even when you never actually use the money, makes you perform better at work. You get better assignments. You get more recognition. You get raises. The money you saved creates a positive feedback loop that accelerates your career and wealth simultaneously. But here's where a lot of people mess up. They finally hit 20,000 in savings and they immediately start thinking about rewards. They've been disciplined for so long, surely they deserve something nice, right? So they buy an expensive car. Or they take a luxury vacation they can't really afford. Or they stretch to buy a house that's at the absolute top of their budget. And just like that, they're back to zero, or worse, they're in debt. They had the boulder rolling down the hill, momentum on their side, and they stopped it dead to celebrate reaching the bottom of the mountain. This is a trap, and it destroys more financial progress than almost anything else. 20,000 isn't a reward. It's a foundation. It's the launch pad for everything that comes next. Treating it like a finish line instead of a starting line is how people stay stuck forever. Let's talk specifically about transportation, because this is where people destroy their wealth without even realizing it. The average person spends $600 to $800 per month on car payments, insurance, gas, and maintenance. Over 40 years, that's over $400,000. Think about that number. $400,000, which for most people is more than they'll need to be financially independent, completely consumed by the need to get from point A to point B. And here's the brutal part. Cars depreciate. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses about 20% of its value. You're not investing in an asset, you're literally destroying wealth. Meanwhile, if you took that same money and invested it instead, it would multiply over time. A $30,000 car that you finance could have grown to over $200,000 if invested over 20 years. The person driving the flashy car feels rich for a moment, but remains financially stressed forever. The person driving the reliable used car builds actual freedom. This isn't about never enjoying anything. It's about understanding opportunity cost and making intentional choices. Every major financial decision, transportation, housing, education, vacations, hobbies, should be filtered through the lens of what you're giving up by spending that money instead of investing it. When you start thinking this way, something interesting happens. You realize that a lot of the things you thought you wanted, the bigger apartment, the expensive hobbies, the luxury brands, are actually less satisfying than the peace of mind that comes from financial security. You start spending money on things that genuinely matter to you and cutting ruthlessly on everything else. And paradoxically, this makes you happier, not more deprived, because you're being intentional instead of reactive. You're designing your life instead of just surviving it. $20,000 isn't a magic number that makes you rich overnight. It won't solve all your problems. It won't let you quit your job and live on a beach forever. But it represents something far more valuable than instant wealth. It represents a fundamental shift in how you relate to money, how you think about the future, and how you see yourself. It's the difference between surviving and thriving, between reacting to life and designing it, between being controlled by money and controlling it. The path to this threshold isn't easy. It requires discipline most people never develop. It requires sacrifices most people won't make. It requires patience in a world that glorifies instant gratification. But every single person who's built real wealth, not lottery winner wealth, not inheritance wealth, but self-made sustainable wealth, crossed this threshold first. They pushed that boulder up the hill, even when it felt impossible, and then they experienced the momentum shift that changed everything. If you haven't started yet, start today. If you're halfway there, keep pushing. Your future self will thank you for building this foundation, because the real power of $20,000 isn't the money itself. It's what it does to your mindset, your opportunities, and your entire life trajectory. That's what actually changes everything.